Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my AM reading video for Friday, February 21st, 2020. I'm technically filming this early, but on Friday I intend to finish this book, Sinners in the Sea, The Untold Story of Noah's Wife by Rebecca Canner. This is the second Noah's Wife retelling book that I've read this month. I talked last week about NAAMAH by Sarah Blake. I still intend to write a quick little compare-contrast post on my reading and writing blog about these two books, but of course I'll have to do it a little later, but I'll just share some rambling thoughts for now. NAAMAH is a much more poetic book. The author is a poet. It's a lot less grounded in like a sense of realism. I mean, yeah, I get it. This is, about a mythic flood. There's not, anything much believable about it, but Blake does very little by way of setting up scenes, like, backstories and world building and even complex characters, really. I mean, I don't think it's incredibly complex in either of the stories, but in Sinners and the Sea, you have much more of a sense of the sons being very different characters. It's told in a linear style, and you really get to know the town that Noah and his nameless wife are living in before the flood happens. You also get to know their neighbors quite a bit, and I think the nameless wife has more of a purpose, I'd say. The major backstory in NAAMAH's story is that she has a sexual relationship with her neighbor Bethel, which we hear about, here and there in flashbacks. But NAAMAH has a much more complicated relationship with, or explored at least, relationship with her neighbor Javan, which is not sexual, but in a way I think I see Javan and the nameless Noah's wife, their relationship and that intensity is similar to NAAMAH and Bethel. Funny enough, actually both Noah's wives have life-altering experiences while in the flood with Nephilim, with angels. But the flood experiences are highly different as well, beyond I mean, everything in NAAMAH is a lot more sexually charged, I think, to the degree where I think I started to see a little behind the fourth wall, and it seemed to be more about the author making a statement than a story. I don't know, it was a little much for me. Whereas most of the relations in Sinners in the Sea are more what you would think of as traditional relationships. I mean, the sex pretty much is either the righteous sex, which is, for procreation, or, the sinning sex, which is, the flesh houses and prostitution, although Canner does, go into humanizing some of those characters. Noah doesn't really see them that way, but his wife certainly does to a certain extent. Whereas NAAMAH, I do have some issues with the degree to which Blake sexualizes things, but I do, in theory, appreciate that she's saying that humans are sexual creatures, and a lot of the complaints people have about how it's not like sound to religious teachings. I mean, technically speaking, Noah's story happens before the covenant, and most humans have a relationship with God anyway, so Another thing that's interesting so far, I mean, I'm just sort of getting into this, the actual time on the ark and the flood section. The floods are very different in these books so far as well. I mean, in Sinners in the Sea, unless things change, which I don't know, they might, but so far it's all darkness and frothing sea and lightning every now and then to, illuminate basically an occasional dead body or whatever. Whereas in NAAMAH, most of the flood is in the light, it's calm waters. I feel like Blake is trying to get a different sort of point across, where this purgatory, as it were, with NAAMAH and her family and all the animals on the ark really is a time where they can reflect about what's going to happen next and why were we able to survive. Whereas I don't think so far they have as much time to do that in Sinners in the Sea, because everyone is still very much fighting for survival. It doesn't seem absolutely certain that God isn't going to just change his mind about letting Noah's family live. There's also more immediacy. Blake has the flood last for, I think, 8-9 months, which I don't think is actually congruent with the two Genesis narratives. I was reading about 40 days or 40 nights or 150 days. So I don't know. I'm not as learned in this as I could be, so I might be missing something, or Blake might have taken artistic liberties. But for Canner, so far they're talking about 40 days, 40 nights, and we're in the early days of the flood, and technically seems like maybe it will only last that long. We also have pregnant wives on both boats, but the relationships in NAAMAH are a lot more, I'm not sure egalitarian really is the right word. More importantly, I think they're much more harmonious, really. People get along a lot better, and not only sexually, but people get along better in NAAMAH than Sinners in the Sea, where one of the tics of the sons having more personality is that at least one of them is more of a jerk. In fact, Japheth, who I think in NAAMAH he has sort of the most personality and stand by his mother and sort of be her rock as she's sort of having an existential crisis way. That's who he is in NAAMAH. But in Sinners in the Sea, he's the one who wants to be righteous like his father, and his father ignores him, and now he's turning brutal and vindictive and self-righteous, and so it's almost the opposite. So I don't know, I think these are some of the things I might try to ramble more coherently about on my blog. Maybe more things will come up as I finish Sinners in the Sea. But that's where I stand right now. It's an interesting project, really, something I don't think about much. I read a lot of Jewish-themed literature, but this particular Bible story I haven't read about in modern literature before. And it is fascinating to see how different writers with different motivations for writing and, their different thought processes come to this relatively blank slate of Noah's wife differently. All I know for sure is I'm pretty sure that this woman will probably get a name at the end of her journey. So yeah, that's what's on my mind right now, but next on the docket is this book. This is Invisible Women, Data Bias in a World Designed for Men by Criado Perez. And I believe it is primarily positing the argument that in terms of setting out scientific hypotheses about what life is like and making life better for humans, male is the default, and it can leave women in the dust sometimes. So yeah. But I am reading, or technically listening to, and that's why I put it up on my iPad, I'm listening to this book for the BookTube Prize, where I'm officially judging it along with 5 other books in the octafinals for 2020. So I can't say much more about it than that until the octafinals conclude in late March. But I do have links down below if you are curious about following the BookTube Prize. So check it out. So that about covers it for me now. I also feel like, I can't leave a link to my unwritten Noah's wife post down below, but I can leave information about the biblical story, especially from a Jewish standpoint, because that's where I'm coming from it from. Also, these 2 authors are Jewish. Blake is more culturally Jewish and didn't grow up with a huge amount of religious education, but came to the Genesis story as an adult. And Canner actually did have a Jewish education during day school, and I think is relying a lot more on traditionally accepted Jewish religious thought about the Noah story. And indeed, 2 of her blurbs on the back were about from rabbis. So I don't know, it's really one of those things because, the most readers are Christian and come into, these modern day fiction stories assuming that the writers are also Christian, and it's not true. And sometimes I think that can make a difference, especially in terms of, I think maybe more Christian writing is more traditionally conservative than a lot of Jewish writing can be. I think we have a wider swath of what's accepted, and certainly if you read NAAMAH, that is not conservative. And Sinners in the Sea, too, certainly allows for some questioning and blasphemy on its own levels. I think both of these stories imagine Noah's wife as more a person of the people having to corral everything without that connection to God and that absolute self-righteous faith of Noah, her husband. But anyway, I guess I am not done rambling on about this subject, but I will have to wrap it up soon, hopefully before the weekend gets into full swing. Hopefully no storms and floods for me, and certainly not on the existential level of losing the rest of humanity along the way. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.